Welcome back everybody to another episode of Direct Comparison. In today's episode, we're going to take a look at Rockstar's recently released Red Dead Redemption 2 and see how it stacks up to its 2010 predecessor, Red Dead Redemption. Now, before we begin, keep in mind that it's been 8 years since the original Red Dead Redemption released, so it's likely we're going to be seeing only visual improvements across the board. But it's worth checking out either way. Also, to ensure that we're getting the highest quality images, we are using the XboxOne X platform for both titles, mainly to take advantage of the backwards compatibility improvements of the original game. Alright, so to start this comparison off, let's first look at our main character model designs. For a 2010 game, the John Marston character model has a surprising amount of small details, all of which appear sharp and clean on the 1X enhanced version of the game. But the big takeaway here is the clear improvement to the physics effects on the character's clothes, with wind blowing small edges of clothing more realistically. Clothing in the original game also blew in the wind slightly, but it was much more subtle. One other cool little detail in Red Dead 2 is the player's hat, which can fall off during combat and needs to be manually recovered, adding a fun new level of immersion to the experience. The hats would fall off in Red Dead Redemption, but only on NPCs. Almost equally important to the main character model is his trusty steed, and Red Dead Redemption's horse animations have remained the absolute best in the entire gaming industry, despite countless games over the past 8 years that have utilized horses to some degree. Red Dead Redemption 2 seems to push this boundary even further, with even more advanced animations offering smoother muscle movement transitions and even greater attention to detail. Horses can be spooked by loud noises and predators and need to be calmed down, and can even get dirty, requiring the player to clean them either by grooming them or having them run through water. Animations overall have seen some significant improvements over the first Red Dead Redemption. John Marston always felt stiff and awkward as he ran, but Arthur Morgan seems to behave more naturally, and the sprinting animation feels like it has some genuine momentum to it. Next, I wanted to look at some basic environmental texture work. Here's where we can see some obvious massive improvements between games. Things like the ground not only have higher resolution textures, but also feature a variety of environmental decorations to make the world feel more believable. Larger objects like boulders appeared bland in the original game, and are much more realistic in Redemption 2. Even the train tracks look better. In Red Dead 1, train tracks were just placed over top of a pebble texture, but in Red Dead 2, the tracks blended more seamlessly with the environment, with pebbles covering parts of the track. Lighting is another field where Red Dead 2 excels. Red Dead 1's lighting effects were never actually that great to begin with. There were some nice God ray effects, but there was always this strange shimmering that made it seem like you were always staring at the sun through a series of tree branches. Red Dead 2 not only removes this annoying shimmering effect, but also features fully dynamic light shafts and far more realistic global illumination. Nighttime scenes have a much more believable appearance to them now, with the moon properly reflecting light onto the environment, rather than just appearing as a static object in the skybox. Shadows were also improved significantly. In the original Red Dead Redemption, the shadow edges would shimmer rapidly and were far too sharp. But in Red Dead 2, the shadows appropriately fade in a gradient relative to the distance of the object. There's still a bit of that shimmer, but it's far more subtle now, and less distracting thanks to the increased shadow resolution. Next up, we have several different examples of special effects used throughout each game. One thing that I was surprised to see toned down was the dynamic movement of various vegetation in the game world. Now, the vegetation absolutely still moves in Redemption 2, and more realistically, but the 2010 game had grass sprites that seemed to move more noticeably than in Redemption 2. Another odd change are the dynamite explosions, which appear to have been downplayed substantially in the sequel. The dynamite in the first game was loud and felt incredibly powerful. Now, at first I thought, oh, well, maybe the dynamite explosions aren't supposed to be crazy big, and they made it more realistic in Redemption 2. But after spending a bit of time looking up videos of dynamite exploding, I think the original game actually had it right. Dynamite generally will kick up a ton of dirt, creating the effect you see in Red Dead Redemption 1. But Red Dead Redemption 2 looks like a firecracker by comparison, and doesn't feel nearly as powerful. The smoke effects in Red Dead Redemption 2 are still very impressive, with thicker clouds and longer draw distances for the effect. This also plays in strongly to the game's dynamic lighting and God rays, especially in the early morning with that thick layer of fog and mist. Due to the game's time frame and location, the hot heat haze doesn't seem to be as prevalent as it was in the dry, dusty deserts of the original game. This effect could still very well be in Red Dead Redemption 2, but I was unable to find it in my time playing through the game so far. Red Dead 2, despite featuring many familiar locations from the original game, does seem to take place in a much more heavily forested area. Most of Redemption 2's environment consists of thick trees, green rolling hills, and cliffsides, whereas most of Redemption 1 was dry desert. There were portions of the 2010 game that took place in densely forested areas, but these haven't aged nearly as well, and when compared to the frozen forest in Redemption 2, it's not even a contest. Snow effects in Red Dead Redemption 2 look unbelievable, with incredible tessellation, particle effects, and realistic animations to go along with it. Following footprints in the snow is not necessarily a new thing in gaming. In fact, games like Assassin's Creed 3 back in 2012 managed to pull off something similar. But Red Dead Redemption 2's tessellation looks significantly better in just about every way, making the thin dusting in the tall trees area of Red Dead Redemption look sad by comparison. Weather effects in general just look much better in the sequel. Storms seem to actually travel across the game world, rather than just randomly triggering the entire skybox to morph into storm clouds. This works hand in hand with the dynamic lighting to provide a beautifully realistic simulation of real-world weather. Next up, we have water effects. Water, as many of you might remember, was John Marston's greatest enemy, killing him instantly if he stepped in too deep. Thankfully, Red Dead Redemption 2 does allow the player to swim in bodies of water, and along with it, we get even nicer water effects. The surface of the water looks pretty decent in both games, but Redemption 2 includes a nice water surface simulation effect when the player interacts with it, and the character's clothes can now get completely soaked rather than just the lower half. And finally, let's listen to a few sound comparisons. Now, bear in mind that these weapons aren't identical, so take this with a grain of salt, but the real idea here is to show how the sound design in general has been improved, with variations to sound reverb, ambient effects, and the clarity of the gunshots themselves. But you guys be the judge. Which game do you think sounds better overall?
Let's go.
And that just about wraps up this episode of Direct Comparison. As expected, Rockstar managed to improve in just about every aspect visually with Red Dead Redemption 2. It's incredible to see what can be accomplished within a single game franchise when the developers aren't pushed to release a sequel right away. Red Dead Redemption was a beloved masterpiece when released back in 2010, and is still a fan favorite to this day. But Rockstar managed to push the envelope even further with Red Dead Redemption 2, delivering not only a more cinematic Wild West video game experience, but also delivering state-of-the-art graphics that will make any RTX GPU owner jealous. Thank you all for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Direct Comparison. If you want to learn more about Red Dead Redemption 2, make sure to keep it tuned to my channel for more comparisons, a detailed review, and more in the coming week. And if you haven't already, be sure to like and subscribe for more videos posted every week.